So thank you very much for joining us for our monthly webinar this month. It is Discover PXT Select Pre-Hire Assessment and Hire Smarter. We're going to help you understand how to identify best candidates from a pool of candidates and looking at from sales to C-suite. When you registered, we ask you what you want to learn. And here are the things that I heard. How to hire the best candidates, how to hire smarter. I'd like to see a pre-hire assessment, which is what we're going to do today. I'd like to evaluate this against other assessment tools. I'm looking for a tool to do a better screening of potential hires. Someone did ask how this differs from DISC and behavior type assessments. So we'll just touch on that a little bit. So I'm Cindy Davidson. I'm Director of Business Solutions here at Corexcel, and I have a colleague on the line, Andrea Vi. If you have any trouble, of course, during the webinar, please write to Andrea and she'll help you out. It is being recorded, but your participation in participating, your name, your contact information, it will never be recorded or included. And if we do any kind of questions, sessions, polls, chat, won't be included in the recording either. So please, if you do chat with us, know that that is on a private basis. So what we're going to cover today, and I'm going to do this quickly, 5 or 10 minutes, talking about the role of validated data-driven selection tools and a little bit about the hiring process in general. But again, just for a few minutes, because it seems like most of you really want to get into what is this pre-hire assessment all about. I'm going to handle the validity and reliability ongoing, but in more detail a little bit later in the presentation. So we are going to get right into the tool pretty quickly, and at the end, certainly give you ways to get started. So today, many people in our country and around the world, right, we spend more time working than doing anything else. And our workspaces have become our second homes. And sometimes our project teams, again, become second families to us. They really become personal friends. Every workplace is unique, but can all relate to a common goal. And that's everyone wants to be at a great place to work. And organizations know that that only happens if they hire the right people. And organizations strive to have high-performing individuals and teams. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because we can hire mediocre on our own, right? And a 2015 Gallup poll report states that high performers have several things going for them. And among the list are how engaged they are and how well their innate talents and abilities match the positions they're in. Seems to make common sense, right? And each variable does affect outcomes on its own, but the highest performance comes from the combination. So how are we doing? How are employers doing getting high performers? Employers are reporting that they can't rely on resume and interview to make an informed decision on hiring. And talent leaders aren't convinced that they're measuring quality of hires effectively. 1 in 5 new hires are bad or have regretted decisions according to hiring managers on their team. Doesn't mean they're bad people. It means they were a bad hire. They were bad for that position in that organization. So why is it important to talk about hiring better? Well, let's just look at a few numbers. And they may sound staggering. I'm sure you have your own number in mind. And if you want to, you can share it through chat and we'll share it with the rest of the group here. But gosh, some costs are put at $240,000. The U.S. Department of Labor, I think, is a little conservative. They say it's 30% of an employee's first year earnings. I've heard as much as 1 or 2 or 3 times on earnings. But again, if you think about all the things that go into, the recruiting time, the potential of the potential downsides of morale and the downsides to the business, particularly if it's a small business, it can be a real threat to an organization. because of the relationships and again, all the disruption. You think about replacement costs. And we know that hiring a new person always comes with risks, and you cannot mitigate all the risk. Certainly nothing is 100%. But again, many people, and you can probably relate to these things that come from the cost of a mediocre hire. So mediocre hires are generally not engaged, not productive, cause frustration. They impact the team's morale. So when it's a clear wrong hire, that sometimes is even a little better to work with than a mediocre hire, because these folks can be draining and there's no clear black or white way where there is with perhaps a completely inappropriate hire to move things along. So it's why we know that offering a selection solution can make a real difference. So I'm just going to get into the importance of providing data by giving you a hypothetical but a pretty realistic example that I think you can relate to. So we're going to meet this hypothetical gentleman named Ben. He applies for a manager position at your company. He submits a polished resume, impressive background, extensive experience. He's enthusiastic in the interview. He seems positive. His references check out. And you think, my gosh, someone with this level of experience would be perfect to train and manage my team. They're younger, they're more inexperienced. So, gosh, you hire Ben. And then you kind of wait and you think, my gosh, these things that I saw in the interview, I'm not seeing. In fact, it appears that he really likes to work alone. He really doesn't like mentoring, or he's not that concerned with other people's success. And in fact, he lacks a sense of urgency, and he's not real accurate with numbers and data, which is very important because we are technically based here. So by July, this gentleman's energy fades. It's obvious he was a bad hire, but you had to find out the hard way that the qualities, he may have been successful in his previous position, his previous organization. Why didn't that translate to yours? Could you have known? We think you could have known. So adding data to traditional hiring tactics can sound overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. So what if you had a way to look at some of the key predictors of success, and you can relate to these? You already have a way to measure some of these: technical skills, work experience and history, the knowledge of the job. But what we're talking about here is what PXT Select measures: thinking style, behavior traits, and interests. And a view of these combined with an effective interview process can really help your organization gain a meaningful edge in hiring. So again, what's selection? It's using appropriate resources and tools to inform the decision-making process of selecting a candidate. There is no magic bullet, but there are tools that will bring you close to a very good decision. So again, PXT Select, it's not that you would use this to make a decision 100%. You want to weight it in your whole selection process. And here's a sample. It can vary greatly depending on your organization. But again, the main point is that the PXT Select is one of several components. It's never the full decision. In fact, the Department of Labor states that an assessment should never make up more than 1/3 of your decision. Again, I think you probably already know that. It's not going to provide a magical correct answer, but it's going to bring insight into your process to make it more robust and complete and give you more confidence in the decision that you're making. So again, let's just go back there for one moment. So you're going to screen for resumes. Some companies actually do a screening interview and they get to a point where they're narrowing candidates down perhaps to 3 to 5 before they implement a selection assessment. Other organizations may do it in the beginning. So the PXT Select is all about job fit. It's giving you insight into how well a candidate is suited for a particular job. And it looks at 3 areas. Thinking style, how well does this candidate fit the job in thinking style, in their behavior traits, and those 2 elements contribute 40% to the overall fit. And interest is less, is 20%. It's maybe not as important, but it's still critical, especially when we talk about employee engagement. So again, using the job fit, what's called a job fit model, the assessment is going to evaluate a person's cognitive abilities, behavior traits, and interests. And those are the 3 areas of what was called the person-environment fit model. And the decision to focus on these 3 areas was based on findings that go back to 1909. If you want a little bit of history, Frank Parsons developed what was called the Parsons tripartite model for vocational direction. And it proposed these 3 areas in addition to what's the job market look like, so that people could get an objective view of what traits do I have, what are the available jobs, and where should I go. So it boils down to this. When you can identify what's required to be successful in a position and have a view and measure of a candidate's thinking style, behaviors, and interests, then we can establish a job fit. And organizational psychologists, career coaches, HR practitioners, again, maybe you can relate to this, you agree that individuals perform best when they hold positions best suited to their traits. So this initial framework evolved into Williams' trait and factor theory of occupational choice in the late 30s. Further work in the 90s refined the process, which led to, again, this person-environment fit model, which suggests, again, that people are drawn to environments that allow them to express their traits, and that this fits, that the fit results in a significant desirable outcome, and it can be adapted over time. So here we go. We're going to start looking at the assessment suite, which all begins with looking at what is required of the job to be successful. What does a top performer, not a mediocre performer, what does a top performer in a particular role look like? So this is called the performance model. And we have a library of over 140 of them, which are templates of jobs based on traits of people who have been successful. And the data comes from thousands of individuals and case studies, and it taps into the Department of Labor's ONET database. They are validated for selection, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And you can begin right away using the library and choose a job that best aligns with the position that you're hiring for. And I'll give you a glimpse of what that looks like. So this is the first page from a performance model. And again, this is a sample position. You can see here, this is manager sales. So the colored bars you see in each area. So you'll see in thinking style, there's a composite score, and then you'll see verbal skill, reasoning, numerical ability, reasoning. You'll see 9 behavior traits, and then you'll see top interests, saying out of 6, these are the 3 top interests of top performers for this particular position. So again, the colored bars are where you would want the ideal candidate to be placed once they take the assessment. When a candidate completes an online assessment, it takes about 60 to 90 minutes. You'll see their responses on a scale, and we'll show you that now. So here is a sample. This gentleman is Oliver Chase. So you can see the OC initials, where they are on each of these areas that are being measured. So the entire report is a 12-page comprehensive selection report. So in this example, you can see Oliver fits the model overall. He has an overall fit of 70%, and where, again, the percentage is not necessarily where you would put somebody in a, okay, I should hire the highest percentage. It is, if somebody lands below a 70%, you may have concerns about whether or not that really is a good fit. So Oliver fits the model overall, and we're going to take a look at this report a little bit closer in more detail. But first, again, we're gonna go back to Ben a little bit, and if his manager had used a tool, she may have known that because of the scale, Ben's numerical ability wasn't up to par, right? She might have known that he prefers to work alone because of how he would have landed on the behavior scale. So again, for example, here we see a sample candidate's ratings. This is not Ben, we're back to Oliver Chase. So his composite score is, in the thinking style here, is a 79% fit. So this particular section, again, contributes 40% to the overall fit for the job. And let's talk about each one of these. The verbal skill section measures vocabulary, and it measures it by asking participants to choose synonyms to words. The verbal reasoning measures the ability to use words in reasoning and problem solving, and how that's measured is respondents' complete analogies. The numerical ability measures numeric calculation abilities by giving participants numeric formulas to perform calculations, and the numeric reasoning takes it a step further, measures their ability to use calculations to solve problems. And so you can see here, Oliver fits the model. He actually has a higher verbal skill than this position calls for, and higher numeric reasoning. In the behavior section, participants are asked to agree or disagree with statements of work-related preferences. And you can see the 9 distinct areas that are measured here: pace, assertiveness, sociability, conformity, outlook, decisiveness, accommodation, independence, and judgment. The participant is going to get more strongly worded statements for each endorsed item, because again, it's trying to, the assessment goal is to not just see if somebody is, on the steady side or urgent side of pace, but just where are they on the scale. And again, the behavior traits contribute 40% to the overall job fit. And finally, on the interest, participants are asked to rate their level of enjoyment of various activities, and it measures their degree of interest in these 6 areas that you see on the left there: technical, creative, financial, administrative, enterprising, people service, mechanical. And it's done in what's called a paired comparison format. So respondents are asked whether they would somewhat prefer one activity over another or highly prefer one activity over another. And this again goes back to early work. It's based on John Holland's 1959 Ryeset classification or model. Now, interests don't contribute as much because many times people have their interests adequately filled outside the job. However, it's a consideration because it does and can contribute to an employee's overall level of engagement. So what does this look like from a candidate's perspective? So they receive an assessment that is unique to them based on their answers. It uses what's called an adaptive testing format, and that makes the PXT Select very, very different from other assessments on the market. In the cognitive section, for example, increasingly more difficult questions are given in response to correct answers. Easier questions are given following incorrect answers. And behavioral items are presented in a similar format, again, with increasingly stronger worded statements given following each endorsed item. So kind of show you what that looks like just very quickly. So a candidate's going to get perhaps a moderate question, which they answer correctly. They'll get a more difficult question. Again, maybe in that section, the same type of question to see, do they go to the next level of very difficult questions until they cannot answer a question correctly, because it is trying to measure a candidate's upper scale level. It also makes the assessment less frustrating. If you can imagine, if everyone gets the same assessment, what is an executive level person going to feel about getting 50 easy questions? What is another level person going to feel about continuing to get very difficult questions that they can't get right? How frustrating would that be? So it not only maximizes the precision, but it makes the experience a whole lot better for the candidate. And we're going to take a look at what the candidate experience looks like. They do, when you send out an assessment code to a candidate, they are going to be able to view a short video before they even enter the assessment. And we'll take a look at what they see.
Welcome. You've been invited to take a PXT Select assessment. When organizations take the time to match people with jobs that will bring out their best potential, everyone wins. That's why you're here. PXT Select will help you share your work-related behaviors, interests, and problem-solving abilities. That's right, there's going to be some math and some vocabulary. All jobs require some form of problem-solving. That's the reason for these questions. Don't worry if some seem difficult. The assessment is designed to measure the upper range of a person's numerical and verbal ability. No matter who you are, some of these questions will challenge you. Feel free to use a calculator if you wish, but please don't use any other outside assistance like the internet or your high school math teacher. This is not a pass or fail test. It's about understanding the fit between you and a role. You will also answer some simple questions about yourself and your interests. When responding to these questions, it's important to be yourself. There is no time limit for taking PXT Select. Most people set aside an hour, but feel free to complete it at your own pace. If you need to step away, don't worry. Your work will automatically be saved if you exit the assessment before you're finished. But be sure to remember your password so you can log back in with ease. Thank you for taking the time to complete PXT Select.
So let's take a closer look at some of the pages in the report. Remember, in the sample for Oliver Chase, the comprehensive selection report told us that he fits the model overall, and his composite score in the thinking style also fits the model. So what it's going to share with you here is some narrative. What is the ideal candidate? It says they assimilate information with minimal confusion and can handle more complex information processing. In looking further at the detail, the model is looking for somebody who scores above 6.5 on numerical ability, and describing that to mean that the ideal candidate performs intricate calculations easily. So again, you'll see that Oliver fits the model here. On numeric reasoning, Oliver actually analyzes numerical data at a more advanced level. So again, what does that mean for this position? Well, it may mean that he may have unused talents in this area. And if he becomes your top candidate, you'll want to ask him questions around that to make sure that he doesn't become frustrated in the position. The ideal candidate on PACE, very active and results-driven, with the ability to juggle the demands of several tasks at once. On assertiveness, which we put up here, little need to have influence over others, and instead is content to follow directions. So again, this is just showing the performance model. So the comprehensive selection report, once the candidate takes it, again, it's going to show where he fits the model on PACE. He actually is a little bit more assertive, actually a lot more forceful than the model calls for. Sociability, he prefers a little less interaction than is required. Overall, in conformity, he does fit the model. So here they're looking for, again, this is the performance model. This is what you're looking at before a candidate takes it. The ideal candidate's enterprising, people service, and financial administration in the interests. And the ideal candidate is explained, what are you looking for? You're looking for somebody motivated to attend to the detailed aspects of a position while focusing on profit issues, balancing administrative side of work with the competitive. Individual appreciates leading, but cooperating with others. And again, once somebody takes the assessment, what does it look like in terms of interests? Well, you can see here, the ideal candidate interests, as we explained, were enterprising, people service, and financial, but Oliver Chase's looks like his are a little bit different than what the ideal candidate would call for. He's got a technical interest, he's creative, and his financial admin is third there, tied with enterprising, which would be at the top normally. So again, he's just got his in a little bit different order here. The power in the assessment comes from the interview question section. Since you aren't going to, of course, necessarily exclude candidates based solely on their assessment, the interview is really important, and it's why PXT Select includes dynamically generated interview questions. And we use a complex proprietary algorithm to determine the key challenge areas. So you'll see here, these are the areas where the candidate was farthest outside the model. And then you'll see questions that are related to the challenges that the candidate may face. And again, all generated based on the candidate's unique assessment results. So here, in this area we talked about earlier, where he is much more forceful on the assertive scale, you're going to want to ask him, when working with a team, how do you get buy-in from colleagues if you think you have a good idea? Can you describe a recent situation where you felt it was best to defer to others or not take action? And it also gives you, what do you want to listen for? So you want to listen in this area how willing this candidate is to soften his level of assertiveness or defer to others. Again, two more areas that he was outside is on the decisiveness, much more deliberate than the performance model, and the verbal skill, he was actually above the performance model. So sometimes people think that being above is always good, can always be successful, but you would have to ask somebody here if, since he communicates at a higher level, tell me a time you realized you were speaking at a more advanced level than a colleague could understand. What did you do to make sure that the candidate or that the other employee understood your communication? It also gives you, again, then the areas of strength. So you will want to listen for how this person, for example, assesses and applies the information for different settings. So may be very good at verbal reasoning, but I want to hear more still about that. Here he fits the model on numerical ability and again on PACE. So again, wants you to confirm or wants you to find out more about those areas. And then it does give you interview questions for every other area. So let's say PACE was not on either of those pages, but that is an important behavior trait for your particular organization or this particular team. you would want to dive into that in more detail with all of the candidates. Again, you can see the sample questions here. Describe a time when you and your colleagues were working toward an aggressive deadline. These questions really become a roadmap, and I find that in working with organizations that what they appreciate the most here is that it is giving a team of stakeholders good questions so that they can be consistent as well. Once a candidate takes an assessment, you have access to 10 different reports. So I'll get into now the reports that will be helpful for you first in the hiring process. You can compare candidates. So this is a clip from the candidate comparison report. And you can see here we're comparing 5 candidates. So it doesn't mean that, again, we would hire Andrew Langley just because he's on top, but we probably more would consider Thea Bird, Oliver Chase, and Andrew Langley for this position. When we start getting way below 70%, we would have concerns about candidates fitting the position. And then you can see the comparison report does give you where these candidates fall on the cognitive ability scale and on the behavior scale. So just looking at the composite score, you can see that you have 2 candidates that fall outside the thinking style. And interesting, if you go down to numerical ability, you can see that Oliver Chase, there's only 1 candidate that really falls in the numerical ability scale. And on interests, again, it compares the interests, and you can see just 1 candidate holds the #1 interest of being enterprising. Perhaps you're interviewing for multiple positions at the same time, and you can consider that there may be candidates who see or respond to a job posting for one position and not another. Sometimes people pigeonhole themselves, right, based on where they've spent the most time. And how about that we often forget as managers the step of leveraging the time and energy we've spent with a candidate that may not be selected this time for this position, but you think they might be a very strong fit for your organization, and you want to attract them perhaps with another position. So again, maybe they weren't the best choice this time, but they could have tremendous value at another time and place. And PXT allows you to explore that. Once a candidate takes an assessment, you can run them against unlimited performance models in the system. So again, this person is hitting highest on the specialist, manager sales next, and lower on the sample position. Multiple positions report. Again, it will give you a page in one report. You can run the candidate and get a complete comprehensive selection report on any position, but the multiple positions report kind of puts it all together for you. So you've got 4 reports here that are all about selection. Your comprehensive selection report, looking at a multiple candidates report, positions report, and that all stems from the performance model that's chosen. The next report we'll talk about that you can generate is called an individual feedback report. That you see on the left, a sample page from it, and an individual's graph. So you can share with an individual. It's recommended really that you share the narrative because it is written in a way that is very easy for anyone to accept the narrative. It's written in a positive way, an accurate but positive way. Sometimes presenting the result summary in a graph, people have a tendency sometimes to look at graphs differently. And you really need the narrative to help someone understand where they fell. It can be a very good idea to share this early if you decide to hire someone. So again, think about if you were the candidate and you went through a 60 to 90 minute assessment and you were given some results, how great it would feel that the company would be that interested in, hey, these are your results and here's how we can help you be successful in this role. There is a coaching report, and what's different from the comprehensive selection report is the narrative. So it's written to a manager or a coach or someone who is going to be involved in helping this individual be successful in their role. And it is a review of all the attributes that are contained in the report. So, for example, it'll show a composite score for thinking style. This person's an 8 on a scale of 5 to 8. So you can see it says, what do you need to know about Oliver? He's an effective learner. He solves problems effectively. He needs challenge. His capacity to adapt is very strong. So again, it's going to give you an overview of this individual. And then what does it mean in terms of how I'm going to help this individual be successful in this position? I've got to keep his workload and training opportunities challenging, and I've got to allow him to apply his problem-solving skills. So again, he feels challenged and he doesn't become bored. You can also choose to give hiring managers the assessment, so you can run manager-employee reports as part of the pre-hire or onboarding process. So this talks to the manager about here's where you are and here's where your new employee is in terms of behavior traits, and what does that mean in terms of how you want to consider managing this individual. So again, on assertiveness, what does it mean in terms of you working together? And again, bottom line, where do you want to go? There is a team report. So as you continue to integrate PXT into your organization, you can make available team reports. And you can see where a team falls, perhaps, on a behavior scale. And each team member can get a report that, again, is written to them based on their assessment results. So it talks to the team. What does assertiveness look like for the team? What are the points to consider? So for this individual, for example, it's saying, like your teammates tend to be direct when giving feedback and communicating necessary changes. Go to the third one down. So you've got to avoid dominating team discussions and encourage your unassuming teammates to voice their own ideas. We'll give team averages, and again, a quick tip on what does that mean. So on PACE, you want to build checkpoints into this team's plans to pause and ensure quality. So these are the reports that we just reviewed that really are designed for after hire, the onboarding and development. Although it's interesting, I'll just make a note on this coaching report. It can also be used in the pre-hire process, because if you take a look at a coaching report, it will give that manager, that stakeholder, an idea of what they're going to need to do in order to help this individual be successful. So it can actually be a part of looking at, gosh, are these things, are we capable of these things as an organization for this individual? There are 3 sales reports for those of you interested in hiring for sales positions. There is a sales comprehensive selection report, a coaching report, and an individual feedback report, all that speak in sales language. In addition to that, though, the comprehensive selection report includes pages that go through what do these assessment results mean in terms of the critical sales practices. So how is this candidate likely to approach these sales practices? And you can see the page here is the example of how they will approach prospecting, initiating contact, building and maintaining relationships. The subsequent pages will go through how they'll approach closing the sale, self-starting, resourcefulness, coachability, and working with a team. So again, a candidate takes an assessment and you have at your fingertips the whole suite of 9 reports. You can run 3 additional sales-specific reports, and again, you can run a candidate against unlimited performance models. In 2000, the U.S. Department of Labor, so here's where we get a little bit to the validity and reliability of the instrument. They published a testing and what's called a testing and assessment, an employer's guide to good practices, and many of you may already be familiar with this. The guide gives employers a complete view of all the considerations they need to take into account when including assessments as part of their workforce planning. If you're interested in a copy of this, I can email it to you. Just let me know after this session is done. So here are just 5 of the 13 most important factors they outline. Use tools in a purposeful manner, critical to have a clear understanding of what needs to be measured and for what purpose. You don't want to rely too much on any one test to make decisions. You're supposed to use the whole person approach. Use assessments appropriate for the target population. Use only reliable assessment instruments and procedures. In other words, use only assessment tools that provide dependable and consistent information, those that have demonstrated to be valid for the specific purpose for which they are being used. And they really need to be unbiased and fair to all groups. And that's another quick note I'll make. There is so much being written on unconscious bias, and you can really use assessment tools to help you avoid that unconscious bias. And we have customers, for example, that will use the assessment and they will not even present when they are looking at these reports with stakeholders. They won't even present the candidate's name, so that there is no indication at all of the sex of the candidate or where they may have come from. It's very interesting. Again, gives you just a real objective view of a candidate. And again, contained in the 13 principles are also the factors that make a good test. It should measure what it claims to measure. For example, when we're measuring the mental ability, it does in fact measure that and not some other characteristics. The test is job relevant. Again, it measures one or more characteristics that are important to that job. By using the test, you really can make more effective employment decisions. And the degree to which a test is reliable and valid. Again, does it measure consistently and reliably what it claims to measure? So, for example, one indication of reliability is testing. And again, you may have heard those terms in your past. If an individual takes the test again, would they get a similar test score? So PXT Select was developed with all of the U.S. Department of Labor's principle of assessment for test quality in mind, and the results do meet the statistical guidelines they offer for acceptable test quality. And you can see all the documentation. We do make it available on our website in a 43-page PXT Select research report. And again, if you are interested, I can certainly send you the link to that report. It's all about making human decisions about hiring simpler and smarter. And this is just a quick review. These reports feel like a roadmap to me, so that's why I kind of created this little visual. They give a manager very valuable steps in using the reports throughout an employee's career. So it contributes to building a culture of trust, and it all starts with that comprehensive selection report. And again, once somebody comes on board, you're going to use the individual reports, perhaps a team report, really gives recognition for an individual's unique contribution to the workplace. Allows for attention from managers, welcoming from coworkers. And then the coaching report and the manager-employee report, these are ongoing, just gives a clear guideline on, what are we going to need to do for this individual to help them be successful, and can really create, how do we create then expectations, a training plan. And then finally, again, being able to run candidates against multiple positions really allows you to create a career plan, a career path for them, and really a pipeline for open positions. If you're interested, let me help you develop a plan to implement it in your organization. What we do is conduct online workshops to help, again, your stakeholders understand the program, how to use the assessments to the greatest advantage. Staff training, certifications available, and we can also set up an administrative account for your organization so that you can administer the assessments and have a place where your assessment results reside. And we set that up, maintain that for you at no charge, and we train, again, your stakeholders on it at no charge. So I thank you very much for joining me. I know we worked pretty quickly through this, but there was a lot to cover. I would appreciate your candid feedback. I'm always interested in developing myself and bringing the most value I can to you. Again, if you would like links to the Department of Labor documents, if you would like our research report or any additional information, just send me an email. I'd be happy to provide them for you. Just a note that I did not answer on the using DISC and personality and behavior profiles. You probably, now that we have been through this, can see the difference in just a behavior type assessment. Behavior type assessments are extremely valuable. They do give us insight into individuals and their preferences for behavior. What behavior assessments by themselves do not do is they do not link to what behaviors would be most desirable for a particular position. And not just behaviors, but levels of behaviors. Again, if you see, they are all on a scale. So it's not just that, all right, this position calls for somebody assertive. It calls for somebody with a certain level of assertiveness. That's what you're not going to get in a straight behavior assessment. You're also not going to get the cognitive ability section or the interest section. And again, it's not going to relate it to a particular, not just a particular position, but a high performer in a particular position. There are also ways to customize the performance models. And if you are interested in that, we can talk further about that offline.